Hello and welcome to Keep It Classical. My name is Dr. Matthew Nielsen, and today we're going to talk about the Florentine Camerata and the birth of opera. Yes, we're finally talking about the birth of one of the most consequential musical and theatrical genres in history, opera. This is monumental. It's tough to stress how consequential this is. This is just as consequential as the invention of television. It's a significant genre of art and entertainment for a large cross-section of the population for hundreds of years to follow. Let's get started. First, let's start by asking the question, is opera a musical genre or a theatrical genre? I fall into the camp that it's a theatrical genre, but the music is so fundamental to the form and so influential on other music that we can examine it on its own, even out of the context of the theater. So yes, opera is a theatrical form, but where music plays a crucial role. To talk about the beginnings of opera, we have to talk about the context for how opera began. There were a few works that combined music and drama that were forerunners to opera proper. One of these forerunners was the Italian madrigal of the late 1500s and early 1600s. We've talked about madrigals previously and how they started pushing the art of secular music forward. These more or less multi-voice choral works began to evolve into works of one or a few voices and instrumental accompaniment, and sometimes would set the scenes of narratives to music. These are sometimes called madrigal comedies or madrigal cycles. Another forerunner are intermedio. Between the acts of theatrical plays, they needed something else to fill the time while actors changed costumes and scenery was moved around. The solution was essentially to have shorter musical stories sung and staged in between these acts. Kind of like a mini play between the acts of the main play, or like a double feature but interspersed in your normal show. Eventually, these intermedios started to grow longer and more elaborate, even having their own scenery and other stage effects. These two forms paved the way for the new idea of opera, which was to follow. And you can see a clear musical relation to these early operas that follow. Sometimes innovations are done by a solitary figure that single-handedly pushes the envelope on artistic development. In the case of opera, it was a group effort, and unlike the group projects that we did in school, was probably the most effective and consequential group project in the history of ever. So what was this group? Enter the Florentine Camerata. The Florentine Camerata was a group of musicians, poets, humanist scholars, and art enthusiasts in Florence, Italy, who would get together to discuss and explore art, literature, music, and science. Think of it like a book group, but everyone actually did the reading. This group spent a significant amount of time reading and studying ancient Greek plays. While in this study, an important question came up. Was there music used in the ancient performances of these Greek plays? The question comes from the idea of the choruses in the Greek text. Were these choruses sung? What about the rest of the text? Were they sung as well? And if it was, what did it sound like? They concluded that it most likely was sung in its entirety and that it was accompanied by instruments. Now, bless their hearts, they were probably not correct in this conclusion. Scholars today more or less agree that these Greek plays were not sung in the same way that opera was sung. But of course, all they had was text. They didn't actually have any music to prove it. And then they had the brilliant idea, why don't we create our own Greek plays in this fashion and write new music? So they did, and many of these initial efforts were recreations of narratives from Greek antiquity. Now, what did this mean for their new original music? How did they reflect the drama in their music, or use the music to support their drama? One of the members of the Camerata, Galilei, who was the father of Galileo Galilei, opined that the most effective way for a character to convey drama in music was through a single musician singing their text alone. No counterpoint, nothing to distract from the melody, inflection, and performance of the individual character. Homophony was the most effective means to accomplish this. It will be accompanied, but by our standards, it will be relatively sparse. As far as the narratives are concerned, they started with stories from Greek mythology, especially those that feature a character who was closely involved with music like Orfeo or Apollo. Authors would write brand new versions of these narratives in the vernacular to be set to new music. These purpose-made scripts for the intention of setting to music will be called libretto, or the plural libretti, which means little book. The first known composition and staging of an opera in Europe was titled Daphne by composer Jacopo Peri, with the words written by Ottavio Rinuccini. This took place in a private performance in October of 1598 at the palace of Jacopo Corsi in Florence. While the words survive in their entirety, the music is mostly lost. However, the work was impressive enough to members of the Medici family that they commissioned a second opera by Peri called Euridice. This tells the story of Euridice, who died after being bitten by a snake and is taken down to the underworld by Hades. Her lover, a musician named Orfeo, ventures down into the underworld in an effort to bring her back to the land of the living. Let's listen to a portion of Euridice. By the way, these performances were not open to the general public yet. These first few operas were private performances for the exclusive enjoyment of the patron funding the production and anyone that they deemed fit to be invited. We won't see opera performances available to the general public until 1637. Even still, it didn't take too long for word to spread around about this new art form and for other composers to try their hand at writing for this new genre. One of those was Italian heavyweight Claudio Monteverdi. Monteverdi's first effort at opera was his own version of the Orpheus narrative, and would really take it to another level. Even in a short period, Monteverdi's efforts took opera from its meager beginnings and started to refine it. He brought to opera what he learned from writing Italian madrigals: text painting, declamation, elevating the words, and emphasizing the drama. Monteverdi's music finds more pathos and a wider range of emotions and rhetorical musical devices. Just like the iPhone did with smartphones, Monteverdi's efforts in opera show that sometimes it isn't the inventor of the new form or idea that changes the world, but someone who takes that idea and makes it better. It still has a long way to go before we get to the operas of the Romantic era, but it's already finding a solid footing here. Let's listen to an example from Orfeo. From its humble beginnings, opera will eventually sweep the continent and occupy the psyche of so many different audiences of various stations. It will be adopted by different nations and start to be performed in several different languages and find new expressions in these various regions. It will become the most important, most widely attended cultural event for the following centuries. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and consider watching another video or my entire playlist of Baroque history. In the meantime, keep it classical.